Isn't it annoying if one of your React components encounters an error and this causes your entire React application to crash, rendering a blank screen? Now, fortunately for us, we have React error boundaries to be able to catch errors in React components and then display a fallback information on the screen. So what exactly are error boundaries? Error boundaries allow us to catch JavaScript errors anywhere in a child component tree and log those errors and also display a fallback UI on the screen. So error boundaries are React components themselves. Now, how do we implement an error boundary? It is nothing but a class component which implements one or both methods called getDerivedState from error or component.didCatch. So if you implement a error boundary class component like this, as shown in this example, that will be able to catch errors. Now, fortunately for us, we have a predefined, simple, reusable React error boundary component called as React Error Boundary, which we can install into our React application by doing an npm install React Error Boundary and then define certain fallback methods and be able to handle errors very easily. Now, we will see the use of the React Error Boundary in an example. To get started with the example, at the prompt, type git clone github.com jmupala react suspense.git and clone the Git repository, and then we will move into the React Suspense Git repository and then do a yarn install. And once the installation is complete, let's open the application in Visual Studio Code. And going back to the terminal, let's do yarn start to start our application. And once the application is started, let's go to a browser and then load the application in the browser. Going to your browser, let's type in http imacusd.hk3000 to load the application. And once the application is loaded, you can see that this displays a list of users. We can click on any user and load the corresponding albums for the user. And once the albums are loaded, we can click on any album and load the photos for the album to this screen. Now, this is the normal functioning of this application. What happens if this application encounters an error? Going to the source code of our application, let's go to the shared here and then open the data operations. And here you see that I'm fetching some data from various URLs here. Let me just cause an error in one of the URLs here. So instead of saying users, I will add an extra E there and then save the changes. Now, when you go to the browser and try to load the application, you will notice that the application will crash soon, displaying an error. And you can see that since we are running this application in development mode, so the error is actually displayed on the screen so that you can actually see where the error was caused. And obviously the error was caused because we tried to access a non-existent URL there. And so if I click on this, you will see that this is what is being displayed on the screen here. So this is the fallback component that I am displaying using an error boundary here. And also we are displaying the actual error on the screen so that we will be able to diagnose where exactly the error was caused. Now, how does this all work? Going back to the source code, you will notice that in my app.js file, we are importing the error boundary from React error boundary. And then our application itself, we are surrounding it with an error boundary component here and the end of the error boundary here. So within which our application is enclosed there. So this error boundary component allows us to be able to catch the error in this boundary and then react to that error appropriately and then display a fallback component here. So the fallback component is specified in this example by this fallback render function that we are supplying as a parameter to the error boundary here. So in the fallback render, you see that this particular function receives the error, the component stack, and the reset error boundary methods as the parameter here. And when you receive that, we are displaying this fallback information on the screen here with a div saying something went wrong and then displaying an error message. You can be a lot more descriptive with the fallback component that you display in case an error is encountered there. Now, in addition, the React error boundary method also supplies another hook called as error boundary. So going to one of the components here in the user list component, you will see that we have use error handler being imported here. And in the code, you will notice that if an error is encountered, I'm going to call the use error handler here, and that throws the error so that my error boundary catches that error and then displays that information. So in case you are fetching data from a server and then you end up receiving an error, that error can be handled easily by using this. Also, within the data operations.js file, you notice that when I am doing a fetch here, if I encounter an error that is caused in not being able to obtain the information from the server, like in the previous example where we encountered an error 404, then the handle errors method catches that and sees that if the response is not okay, then it throws the error with the response status and the response status text in as the message for that error. And this is what is being displayed by the error boundary in that example there. So with this simple example, we have illustrated to you how you can catch errors in the React components with an error boundary defined around the components and be able to display fallback information on the screen as appropriate.